Hey, how's it going? Some MySpace type bullshit up here, wow. Why is this corner so dark? This corner's so light. Am I even in the center? Am I even in focus? That was a very cool, fun, interesting intro to a semi-serious video. But that's fine. That's the way we roll here at amillionmadmusings.com. I don't have a .com, don't look that up. Okay, so basically, I occasionally, like people do, get messages on Tumblr. And one such person asked me whether I could do a bit of a talk about ethical shipping. Or, you know, where should the boundaries be when we ship the ships? So things like shipping people in real life and shipping unconventional relationships and stuff like that, and how much responsibility we as writers have to portray those things in ethical ways, which I thought was really, really interesting. And one of the things that particularly interested me was this idea of where does the ethical lines lie when it comes to shipping and writing about characters who are children or teenagers or underage in any way, shape and form. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today and my thoughts and opinions on it. And this is the key word for today: opinions. This is just my opinion. You may disagree with me on that, and that's completely fine. And if you do, I'd love to have a conversation about it down in the comments below. I know there was a conversation happening over my Why Are All the Ships White Guys video, because I love to just stir that pot of controversy. But yeah, so let's talk about it in the comments below. But yes, like I said, this is just my opinion. And yeah, let's just start. Okay, so what I'm directly referring to here is when people write relationships between people who are teenagers or in some way below the age of consent, or below whatever age it is in your country or state that means that they are legally an adult. In particular, when people write more explicit fan fiction which features these people who are underage. Now, first of all, these people exist in real life. Teenagers and young people are occasionally in relationships and do probably have sex below whatever legal age is in your place of living. Like, that's something that happens, and to not write about these things would be stupid. Those things should be acknowledged and be talked about, and often that acknowledgement comes in the form of stories. So for example, like printed books, TV shows, films, what have you. And therefore it makes sense that some of those relationships will be translated into fan fiction, which is again just another form of story, another form of artwork that we use to portray stories and use to portray voices and people in the real world. That's just something that happens. But at the same time, for some reason, it feels different to me when people write about kids' relationships in fan fiction versus kids and young people in relationships in more traditional media. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one is that if you are reading a printed book or watching a TV show or a film which does feature a relationship between two young people, often that piece of work is aimed towards other kids who are the same age as the characters in that relationship. For example, like Avatar, which is a great show, has like relationships between like the different people in it, and they're all like what, meant to be like 14, 15, but it is a show aimed at kids. And therefore you're kind of staying on an equal playing field, and it's presented in a way that is appropriate for kids. There are some exceptions to this rule. For example, 11 and Mike. Mike? Is his name Mike? It is. In the show Stranger Things, which is a show aimed towards an older audience. But even then, the relationship between 11 and Mike isn't really the focus of the show, and it's kind of not really gone into too deeply. It's just something that kind of happens. However, with fanfiction, when it's the same situation where it's kids being portrayed in relationships with each other, the demographic of readers for fanfiction is different to that of traditional media. So the demographic tends to be older or with a much wider range of ages for readership, which is obviously different to a traditional piece of media which is aimed specifically towards a certain age of people. For example, YA young adult books which feature romance will be aimed towards girls between the age of like 12 and 15, and like that'll be it. But not only is the readership going to be older, but when you portray stories about underage people in digital spaces such as fanfiction, you are, whether you mean to or not, going to be adding connotations of the fanfiction genre to these fics that you're writing. For example, the fact that 2/3 of all fanfiction contains explicit or mature content in some way, shape or form. Now, even if you are not including any explicit content at all in your writing, it's like in a culture of where there is a lot of explicit content, and it's hard to make a distinction between the writing that you're doing, which may be perfectly PG, good old fluffy stuff, and the rest of the writing which exists on fanfiction.net featuring explicit relationships between adults, which can, you know, if you're not really clear, especially to outsiders, cause a lot of like complications and a lot of like sitting down and explaining things to people. And of course that line between the two of them can be blurred anyway. I mean, I would argue there's a massive difference between writing fanfic about 12-year-olds versus fanfic writing about 16-year-olds. And the age of consent and adulthood can change from country to country, can change from state to state. You could be, like me in the UK, writing a piece of fanfiction about two 17-year-olds and it features explicit content in it. Now, in England, over the age of 16, you're an adult now. Like, the age of consent is there, you can do whatever the fuck you want, basically, apart from drink alcohol, but you can still have sex. But anyway, but regardless, that would be something which would be legally seen as two adults having consensual sex. Whereas, if someone was to read that fanfic in America, that would be a completely different story, where in some places the age of consent is 18, that would be considered underage people having sex. And so there's just no good line, there's no like there's no line to this, like all of it's complicated, all of it doesn't really have an answer. I'm just throwing things out into the void and just hoping things kind of stick with people. Just work with me here. I don't want to be sitting here going, how dare you write fanfiction that has like, you know, people under 16 in it. Ooh, that's weird and wrong. Because I think there is definitely a right way of doing it. First, off the bat, just having conversations like these ensures that you're not going to do anything weird. It's always the people who are the most worried that they may accidentally cross those boundaries are the people who are the least likely to accidentally cross those boundaries, you know? So just having conversations like this on fanfiction sites, on Twitter, everywhere, spread the word, talk about shit, question yourself. Ooh, it's gonna make sure that whatever you write, regardless of what it is like kosher, you know? It's kosher shit. I think also, furthermore, there is instances where portraying relationships between people who are underage or much younger adds value to a story. Like I said, people like this exist in real life, and to not talk about them or write about them and not acknowledge their existence in that way is not helpful for anyone. So yeah, there is definitely right times, I think, to talk about this, but I think it's always to do with the right time. If you are writing about this stuff, think, okay, is this actually going to help anyone? What is my motivations for this? How is this going to help the story? And I think there's definitely instances where it is the right time. So don't shy away from doing that if it's something that's genuinely gonna help someone or genuinely gonna aid your story in some way. There is definitely a line. I don't know what that line is. This is just me riffing. I think as long as you're self-aware about these things and we talk about these things, yeah, like I said, it's much less likely that you're gonna do anything that's gonna come across in a way that could potentially be harmful to real life people who are underage, you know? So yes, that was my thoughts. Have them. This is a long, complicated video. Not quite sure how much of it made sense, but it's there for you to take what you will. Please talk to me about it down below in the comments, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.